I'm from the gutter, I told you, we from the slums.
They claim to be kings of the jungle, right?
I just do what I do and stay humble.
I jumped on this beat called a bunga. Okay, I just bring the thunder. We got it sold up this summer, and next summer, yeah, we own one. I'm talking me, my little brother, Brody, from another mother, but the same blood running through our veins. We killing them, you see the remains. Yeah. How you gonna stop the click? We blast like rocket ships.
We out.
We steady blessing them. They need some handkerchiefs. Straight up. I got goons that do whatever I say. They snatch your kids up for Harambe. You shouldn't have them in the wrong place. I see that y'all come around. Don't take that bait, cause boy, you drum. They back in there like blood. How's my clan? They go for me.
What's going on, fam? Come on in. Thanks for being here. You know, that song was made in 2016, and no YouTube, Facebook, you guys can't send me some message about some violation. That happens to be my son. Yeah, he made that song in 2016. One of my favorite cuts, Bloodhounds, featuring OKC, his cousin, and Spride, or is it Scribe? Really, really cool. They don't make music like that anymore. I can't even get into the music nowadays. It just doesn't hit me. The industry of rap and hip hop has went south, in my opinion. But thanks for being here. And if you're watching the replay, I want to thank you as well. And today, yeah, I've had a tough day. Real tough. It's one of those days where I want to go have a drink, and I don't drink. Not all the time. Once or twice a year. Don't smoke. But I want to talk to you today about being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. I was led to talk to you about that today, and probably because I've been an individual in which most of my life I have worked not to put myself in situations in which I'm vulnerable to anyone. And I can tell you, for me, it's been a number of reasons. Number one, of course, is trust. You know, who can you really trust being vulnerable with? Second is judgment. Third reason is the individual that you're being vulnerable with or sharing some things about, you're all in your business. And the fourth reason for me is, what can an individual do with that information? What can they do with me being vulnerable with them in a way that it can come back and hurt me? So this concept of being vulnerable with others has never, ever been in my attaché, or it's never been something that I've done. I've always been very private, very secretive. And when I deal with whatever I'm dealing with, I deal with it on my own. In the last couple years, I've decided to crack the closet door open a little bit and explore being vulnerable. I think for men, and if you're a man and you're watching this, I think we deal with it more. Not sharing, not standing in what I would call being naked in front of others. And so I think a lot of us, a lot of men hold this vibration that we're supposed to just hold things in and not share it. We're supposed to be that pillar. We're supposed to be that rock. And that's pretty much how I've lived my life. All the major decisions I've made in my life, I've made them on my own. Never seeking advice or counsel or anything like that. I never wanted to be vulnerable to anybody else's input. So I think when it comes to males and females, I think vulnerability is handled a little different. I think women are a lot more vulnerable, especially in relationships. And if you have a feeling about that, I want to see it in the comments. But I think in relationships we see how vulnerabilities play out. How many times have you dealt with someone that you're in a relationship with and you're like, well, I'm not going to share with them what I really feel because you're worried about the backlash and how it comes back at you. Or you may have finished a relationship and starting a new one, and you're just not open all the way because you're bringing that past relationship trauma into the new one. And so you have certain safeguards put up in the new relationship, and you're not open, you're not in a state of vulnerability. So this is something that I have been working through, and I've really been paying attention because, yeah, I don't talk a lot about what I go through. I've been wondering if, because we try to be so tough, have we lost out on some valuable things in life because of this hard stance that we're just not going to be vulnerable? Like, how many times have you not asked for help because you didn't want to be vulnerable to the answer or put it out there that you even need help? So I think this entire concept of vulnerability is something that we all are trying to figure out what works best for us individually. One of the biggest examples that I've seen in my life of vulnerability is really, back in Martin Luther King, when they were having the peaceful marching, the nonviolence marching. That to me was one of the highest physical levels of vulnerability, because I was watching an interview where they said that if you did a march and you're connected with this nonviolent movement that they had back then, and let's say people were beating on you or spitting on you or whatnot, you could not retaliate. In fact, if you did, you were kicked out. You were kicked out of the group. You couldn't march or anything anymore. And I'm not that guy. I just couldn't do it. But to me, that's the highest form of vulnerability that I've seen. It's like you are literally standing in a way where people can do something to you and you can't respond or react. And I'm not just that guy. I'm sorry. Um, but I see how it worked. I see how being in that state of vulnerability won the day. And I'm not a guy that's ever going to march for anything. If there's something that I want to support or stand against, I'm going to find another way to go about it. I'm just not some cat that's just going to walk down the street with a poster. Not that one. And that's not to take away anybody that does that. That's just not the way I would roll. But going back to the larger point, that is a powerful state of vulnerability that was displayed back in those times. And so I look at my own life today, and I'm looking at the times that I literally have stood naked for the world to see my truth without worrying about the attack or the backlash. There's a situation I'm in now where, yes, I'm in a state of complete vulnerability. And I felt that that was the only way that I could overcome this particular situation is by being vulnerable. And at first, it was not easy. It got easier with time, but that was a deliberate decision I had to make, because if I didn't go that route, then I would subject myself for further pain. So sometimes we have to stand in that nakedness in order to get through a certain situation. That's the message that I have for you today. Sometimes we have to be in that state of vulnerability. And while I used to think that being in a state of vulnerability would make one weak, because that's how I saw it in myself, like, if I share this information, if I share this truth with someone else and it's not reciprocated, then I'm the one that looks weak. I'm the one that feels weak. I'm the one that feels less than. But today, I'm changing my entire thought process about that. I'm changing some beliefs that I have about that. I've been a guy that many people, countless people, have come to drop their issues and situations and problems on me. It's a level of trust that people have with me, and I take it very serious when people come to me with what they're dealing with, because I understand their vulnerability. You gotta have the trust. Is Ace gonna judge me? Ace is gonna be in my business, and will he use this information against me? And I've treated it very sacred. So I've been the recipient of being the one to hear, but I very seldom am the one to share, because of how I look at just being vulnerable all the way around. But there's some strength in being vulnerable. There's strength in standing naked. I feel like there's an inner integrity that takes place when you can do that and not feel less of or less than. And again, I think the biggest example that we deal with it in our everyday lives is really in our relationships. Are you comfortable standing in complete truth, complete nakedness in your relationship? Are you completely vulnerable to that situation? But I feel that as time moves on, part of the authenticity that will take place with us will have us standing more in that naked truth and having a feeling of being okay with it. And for all my men that are out here, this message is really for you. We have to get better with that. We have to get better with being okay with channeling certain emotions. We have to be better with being okay if we're crying somewhere other than a funeral. You know, at a funeral, it makes sense. Everybody's crying and mourning the loss of someone. So it's okay to cry then, but outside of that, we're not supposed to cry, because we've been taught that crying is a form of weakness and crying is a form of showing your vulnerability. So we have to work on that. We have to take the opportunity to allow ourselves to step into a state of being vulnerable and be okay with it. We really do. And this is a brutal concept and subject for me to talk to you about because I've seen myself, third party, navigate around being vulnerable. Like, you can do everything but be vulnerable. You know, everything that I've done in my life has been very strategic, has been very secret. I don't share a whole lot. I know a lot, don't share a whole lot. It's been important to me that the majority of people that I know see me in a certain light, see me in a certain level. They don't see a downtrodden ace. They don't see the ace that's struggling through issues and problems. And I understand when I do it, but now I'm starting to look at things totally different. I can remember when I was younger dealing with this state of vulnerability where I really recognized it for the first time. I was in a state where I was trying to fit in. I was trying to, fit in with a certain group of kids. And there was a state of vulnerability that I felt that I wasn't good enough because I hadn't been in a fight. Like, you want to be, you want to come over as this tough kid, um, but have you been in a fight? So everybody's talking about fighting but me because I hadn't been in a few of them. So what did I do? I went and got into some fights. And I remember the one time, I think I was in the seventh grade, and I literally put myself in a complete amount of danger being vulnerable. And it was a very painful experience because I got jumped. I got jumped by about 9 kids, got beat up. I was thankful that I got through it, but it was a very painful experience. And coming out of that, I just realized that, you know what, Ace, you have to operate totally different. So I had to totally re-engineer who I was. Totally. Had to reinvent myself and to go about life a totally different way. And the one thing I was not going to do was be vulnerable to anyone. I was not going to show emotion. I was not going to allow anyone to see me in a compromised situation. And what that did was I shut down aspects of myself for a very, very long time. Because it was critical to show one thing, and that's total strength. And I think a lot of men can relate and understand with what I'm talking about. You only show one thing, and that's strength. That's it. You don't show weakness of any kind. There was no compassion. There's nothing but strength, brutal strength, no matter what the situation. And all of your hurt, all of your raw emotions, all of the feelings that you're dealing with, you had to kind of like condense them and put it somewhere and not even deal with it. So being vulnerable it just didn't exist in my playbook. In a lot of ways, I think it has affected some of the relationships. that I've had in my life, and I'm not just talking about, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, this, that, and the other. I'm just talking about it's kind of like it's just been a one-way street. I've been there for a bunch of people, but I don't allow too many people to be there for me. And so in the last couple years, learning to be vulnerable and be okay with it has been somewhat challenging. So if you're one of those people like me, I would ask you to consider looking at vulnerability a little bit different. And this isn't to suggest that you do something to put yourself in harm's way or to do something where you could be taken advantage of. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what I'm talking about when sharing with you about this whole concept of being vulnerable. I do feel that we are all on this planet and we all have our tribe. I feel that we have certain individuals in our life that have been assigned to us. And those individuals that have been assigned to us create a safe place for you to be vulnerable. And I think that we should take advantage of that. I think we should explore that. And I'm starting to believe, and here again, this is one of the belief systems that is cracking and I'm changing and removing and replacing. I'm starting to believe that there's certain people that you could be vulnerable with and it could be very healthy. It could be very healthy. So I was led to bring this message to you today. I think that there are a number of people that will see this and get something out of it. I want you to know that I'm never going to come over like I know everything, because I don't. Many of the things that I teach, many of the concepts that I bring to you are things that I'm still learning through and evolving with as well. I'm not one of those guys that has arrived or is perfect or anything like that. My whole life has been shook upside down in the last couple years, and I welcome it. I've never had to trust more than I've trusted in the last couple years. Like, all of this is new to me. It's like a whole new identity of Ace is coming out, an Ace that I didn't know existed. And part of that coming out is being challenged. The beliefs I've been holding are being challenged. My protocols, my strategies, how I go about things, how I look at life, all of that is being challenged. It's almost as though there is a second awakening taking place with me. So be okay being vulnerable. There are people that you have around you that are assigned to you. Recognize them. And when you recognize them, be okay with it. They're there for a reason. But I'm starting to believe that there is great benefits to being in a state of vulnerability, being in a state where you're naked and standing naked in your truth. Emmanuel, EGA, thanks for being here. Let me just check and see if anybody's on Facebook. A couple people viewing, no comments yet. I'd love to hear about how you guys feel about being vulnerable. Are you vulnerable with everyone? Are you vulnerable with your spouse? Are you partially vulnerable to them? Is there an individual in your life that you are 100% completely vulnerable with? I've never been vulnerable with my parents. I never felt that I could, and nothing against them. So, this entire concept of vulnerability is something in the last couple years that I am just cracking open. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm opening up the closet to it. Emmanuel, this broadcast is about being vulnerable, standing in your naked truth. Is there anybody in your life that you completely trust and tell everything to? Do you have someone in your life like that? So, yes, take hold of those people that are assigned to you, and you know who they are. They've probably been there for a long time. Um, they may not line up with how you roll. A lot of the times we look at our drinking buddies um, as the person we're supposed to be vulnerable with. No, or sometimes we look at, oh, that girl is sexy. I need to be vulnerable with her. No. Oftentimes, I think, in my belief, like the person that you can be vulnerable with, they're a little different. They're a little different. Emmanuel says the only one I trust is my wife and older brother. Well, great. I'm glad you have two people in your life like that. But there are people with spouses that are not completely vulnerable with them. And I'm not judging it as good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is. Because I think in relationships, that may be the hardest thing that two people in a relationship may be struggling with, is being vulnerable with one another. Now, I think that maybe as time goes on, it may become easier. Maybe the trust tightens up. Maybe the experiences that you and whoever you're with go through, it kind of forms that bond that, hey, I have your back. I'm not going to judge you or anything like that. But I think there are a number of people that struggle with the concept of vulnerability. And I know for many years I did. Emmanuel says he trusts his wife and older brother because they are the only ones who can bail him out when he's caught in a situation. That's awesome. So you have that trust. You know, the people in my camp know that I have them 100%. Like if you show up at my house and there's a body in the trunk, we're gonna go bury it together, and I'm not gonna say anything like it didn't happen. That's what you have with me. And some people know they can be that vulnerable with me. And I'm not telling you guys to go out and make bodies. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want people showing up at people's houses, body in the trunk. This is a test. No, it's not like that. I'm just saying that's the extent of the people that I have in my tribe. That's the extent that you can be vulnerable with me, because that's just how I roll. Um, that was extreme, bro. Yeah, it was, Emmanuel. But that's just how I am. Like if you are in my squad, if you're part of my tribe, if you are in my clique, I'm there for life. Real talk. And that's just how I'm wired. That's how I've always been. There are things that I will take to the grave with me now. Um, but the very gift that I've given to others, I've struggled taking from people that would probably do the same for me. I've struggled with it because of the trust, because of, am I going to be judged? Because I didn't want people in my business, or what will they do with the information? You know, um, so I am going to leave you guys with that. I didn't want this to go longer than 30 minutes, but I want you guys to really, really take this concept in, because I think as we move forward, we have to look at the vulnerableness within us. We have to look at the people that we have around us. We have to identify our tribe. We have to identify those individuals that have our back no matter what. I feel it's extremely important. And if you're like me, if you're the secret squirrel, if you move in silence, I understand that. But I feel that I'm going to tell you something. There have been many times where I felt alone on an island because of the protocols and the things of how I set my life up when it comes to that. Like if I'm dealing with a mountain of an issue, I climb the mountain alone and I don't tell anyone. And I'm starting to really change my thought process and my belief system when it comes to that. Okay. Thanks for being here with me. Love and respect. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.